Hey everybody, it's Anita Anello, and welcome back to the podcast. This is the messy middle, and as you know, for those that follow my channel, it's one mom's journey to be able to build a profitable business. I have my good friend Kristin Engen on the line with me today on the podcast. And today, one of the things that we're going to talk about as I introduce Kristin, who's really generally like she's a rock star. She and I, when we first met, we just totally hit it off because our backgrounds are so similar. She's just a superstar in the things she's done in her past, and we're going to talk about that. She's a former Fortune 50 corporate merchandiser and now turned online messaging strategist. So I just want to welcome her to the podcast today. I know, ladies, that as she speaks, oh gosh, you're just going to get just a radical shift and your perspective on what your next steps are. So, Kristin, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for the way that you're going to bless our audience as we just connect and talk about the things that are so important to us as women.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Anita. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be introduced to the crew that's here. And I love it. I love what you're doing here. I love your heart for the Lord. I love your heart to serve. And like Anita said, when we first started talking, I got a little spicy. We're in our mastermind, and I got a little spicy. And next thing you know, I see her like raising her hand and like, preach, girl. And we were like, yes, we're totally kindred spirits. And it's so good. So excited to be here with you all today.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so you know that when we talk about on this podcast, like we are focusing on serving women that have come from the corporate space or are currently in that corporate space. You have a certain level of success, you kind of reached that pinnacle spot in your career. You might be at a spot where we were, where we're like, can't take it anymore. I got to do something else. So if that's you, you're in the right space, ladies. And then it's also for those of us that have this God-sized idea of a dream inside of us, and we want to be able to transition over, taking that specialized knowledge and transitioning over into being entrepreneurs and really running our own online businesses and profitable businesses in the online space. So, Kristin, talk to us today. Like, give us a little bit of maybe your background and kind of what brought you to where you are in your journey right now.
Absolutely. So my background is basically 21 years in corporate merchandising. So I was a buyer for Costco for a number of years, worked at Costco for a number of years, came up the ranks there, was responsible for one of the largest non-foods categories, and also really built and grew the non-foods digital ticketing system and structure, which sort of spanned both the IT band, we had the merchandising band, which I technically was over, but you wear a lot of hats at Costco, which is a blessing. Sometimes it doesn't always feel that way, but as I'm sure many corporate women understand. And then managing the team, kind of like you're putting in all the hats, but ultimately you're responsible for ensuring that you have the right items that, in this circumstance, it was the Costco members were interested in purchasing. And so I would say that was one of the key things that I did when I was over at Costco. I also have worked for Amazon as a senior vendor manager, and managed the Microsoft, it was primarily Xbox and Amazon relationship. And so quite a bit of my background has been, I would say actually primarily the majority of my background has been in merchandising and or marketing.
Wow, that's so cool. You are a rock star. I love that. I love that each time we talk to new people. Isn't it so cool as women? Like we can tell a part of our story, but when you share your story in a different context, all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, my friend, she's done so much more than I really even knew about. I love it. I totally love it. Okay, so talk to us about where you are. Like, what are your next steps now? Where did you land, like post these like rock star jobs and being able to transition into building your own business in the online space? Like, where are you at in that journey?
Sure, sure. So I think something that would be really interesting to share is when I very first, I felt like called to actually leave Costco, which was probably one of the scariest, actually, I'm going to say it was the scariest thing I've ever even done in my entire life, was walking away from an extremely lucrative career, making multi six figures with a clear path to, moving on up the ladder, continuing to move up the ladder. And so leaving that job, I wanted to go into more of an operations role and customer success role at the time. And so when I first left Costco, I actually had a client lined up that I was working with. And for that first year, I kind of call it like that was my little baby steps first year of figuring out like the whole entrepreneurial path, which is, and I think so much of that actually was me breaking down my identity because it was so tied to my the company I worked for, the position that I held, and the salary that I received. And that year of no longer having those three sort of, stools to sit on with my chair had such a large impact, way more than I ever even had anticipated or imagined. And so I didn't completely, it was like I was sort of in two worlds. It was like I hadn't quite made that shift in my mind yet that, oh, I'm really doing this. And so, and it all makes perfect sense now. God, he had his hand, he never took his hand off me. He had it. And so at a certain point, I realized, you know what, I want to start making some more money again. And I hadn't learned the skills as much as I was great at corporate marketing. It's very different when I'm Kristin marketing now. And so I wasn't quite there yet. And so that's when I ended up going back to Amazon. But at that point, literally probably like 7 months into Amazon, I had realized like I had already gotten that taste of what that could feel like to do my own thing, to have in a different sense that freedom. It's a different type of freedom. Anita and I talked about this the other day. Like it's almost like the freedom can almost be overwhelming, whereas you're so used to a very strong structure and or goals that you're used to having, and we're all somewhat ideally marching in sync towards those goals. And so anyway, I was 7 months into Amazon. I had already known that that was not something I wanted to continue to do. I really did want to go out and do my own thing. And so that's what then led me into, so I made it a little under a year. If you look at my LinkedIn, I think it technically says 11 months, and it was so frustrating to me. But then I thought, who cares? Because I'm not planning on going back into corporate America again. So nobody is going to care about what you have on your, it's so funny too, when you go into entrepreneurship, all these things that you used to care about, or you thought people cared about so much in corporate America. Yeah, nobody cares about that anymore. But it really was learning like, okay, now really, what do I want to do? Who do I want to serve? How do I want to help them? And how do I work my faith into this, which has been something that is super important. And God, have you really called me to work my faith into this piece? And so that's currently where I'm at, is supporting people with their online messaging, working as a copywriter right now, and actually just launched my very first digital product. And so Anita and I are together in the mastermind, yes, with Ray Edwards, which is amazing. And so we've been working on just building out like what does this look like, and how do we want to accomplish our dreams, and who do we really want to serve?
That's so cool. Okay, so you touched on a couple of things that are really interesting to me, and I think to our audience. One was when you left your corporate job, you said it took about a year. And do you know so my listeners know I took early retirement to come home and homeschool my kids full time. I was super young, but I had done so well in my career. Like I had the bandwidth, the finances, like I had all those pieces in place to be able to take a break for a long season and continue to homeschool my kids. And that's not a new thing for us. Like we've been doing that for 14 years and still running strong. But what was interesting to me is it took me also a full year to unwind, kind of like that tension and that stress and that like ridiculous schedule of being a successful, like, right, I was a software executive, so being a successful software executive and having my whole life planned out, and then having like my life, and then what I would do, just because this is me, like I'd plan my life, I'd plan my husband's life, I'd plan the nanny to take care of the kids' lives, like I had everybody right, rocking and rolling, all that kind of stuff. But that process actually took me a full year to unwind a lot of what I now call like a lot of this nonsense that I had worked into me about what was important, my priorities. And it just took a while to kind of detox. I've noticed that to be similar to for a lot of us women in the corporate space as we come out of that. And then when you kind of like, okay, like now what, right? Then whenever you hit that spot, then you start to shift over to like, oh, I wanted all this freedom. I fought for all this freedom. God called me into this area to go and do something that's so completely different and have this freedom. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, now what do I do? You know, I have so much freedom, and it's kind of like, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
how do I prioritize my day? How do I,
Mhm.
how do I, like in the online space, especially, we're so bombarded with, you have to do all these
Oh
things,
gosh.
right? And so there's a lot we can talk about there, but yeah, talk to me just a little bit more about the freedom concept, and like, how do you navigate that, right? How do you decide, Kristin, what are going to be your priorities, where you're going to focus, who you're going to listen to? Maybe just start with like one of those three topics, because there's a lot of information. And what I notice that in this space as believers, like just everybody as a whole, like we can feel so overwhelmed as women, moms, wives, corporate executives, successful women, like all those labels. So how do you find freedom in that and being able to follow the path that you're supposed to be on?
You know, I have so much to say about this. Like, it can be such an incredible journey because the reality is that all you have to do is spend 5 minutes on Instagram and follow 2 or 3 gurus to then get 20 different pieces of advice as to what you're supposed to be focusing on, what you're supposed to be doing, what is the world's definition of success. How is it, you need to be this boss babe, you need to be this, you need to be that. And it just, like, the noise can become so deafening. Like, it's like the madding crowd can just get in your ear, and it can cause you so much angst and then confusion and then frustration. And the funny thing and if you were a corporate executive, which you were, and which I would probably, I'm going to Costco buyer and by any means in any other company, managing, over, 500 million a year, that would most likely be at that level. You had a team and you have support under you, right? And it's different when you're doing it on your own and you're growing. And so I think the key is to first and foremost really get very clear and specific on what voices you want to allow into your head, to speak into your business. And the reality is that is going to take a little bit of trial and error. Um, but leaning into that discernment, and especially just really, I mean, for me, focusing daily on getting into the word, getting into what this Holy Spirit is leading me to want to focus on, that's more spiritual, like practical brass tacks. Um, I would say, and I really truly cannot like emphasize this enough, getting into a group of other entrepreneurs who are doing the same thing that you're doing, and ideally are even a few steps ahead of you. Like, there could be a mix, but finding that group where they're doing it successfully, and they look at your goals and dreams and hopes, and they're like, yeah, you're not even thinking big enough there, girl. You're not even
Right.
thinking right.
Yeah.
Versus, you've got your friends in corporate and they're looking at you like, what are you doing? Because they can't comprehend it.
Right.
Nor could I.
Right. And so on that, right, find what we've talked about a lot on this podcast is, ladies, find a community of
Amen.
women It doesn't matter if it's women or men or whatever. Find a community of people who have shared values and can be your champions.
Yep.
Kristin mentioned that we are in a high ticket mastermind with a coach that we know and love. And one of the things that we love about that is we were able to not even just give ourselves direction and follow direction, but also be able to have a safe place where we can talk about the hard things about business, because it's the mindset and the tactics and the tasks every day as a solopreneur or just starting out entrepreneur or a small business owner are very different than what we had when we were all in the corporate space. So it's just very different. It's hard to even sometimes encapsulate all of it until you start going of like, oh, as an employee, it was somebody else's responsibility to do all this, and I gave that responsibility away. But now as a business owner, it's all my responsibility. So I get
Mm-hmm.
all the glory when things go great, but I also carry all the burdens when things
Yeah,
aren't going so great. And I don't have revenue yet or something like that, right? So
totally.
what about you? Like, how did you find, just for where you are for your step
Mhm.
right now, how did you find like your one thing? Like, we talk a lot in my space. I love to be able to talk and encourage women about being able to take their specialized knowledge and turn that into the business of their dreams, turn that into a profitable consulting business. Like, how did you go through the process of finding like your one thing that you were going to do now? It doesn't have to be like your end all be all, but how did you go through that process? Let's talk about that a little bit.
I think there's trial and error. And a big thing that I've learned, Anita, that I mean, I cannot like stress this enough, is I was trying to be like the other people that I would see. Like, you look at the Amy Porterfields, you look at the Jenna Kutchers, and they're amazing. They are by all means amazing. They certainly can be people you can respect and look at certain areas where you would love to emulate. But I had to get super clear on, if I'm going to build this, it has to be my way, and giving myself permission to take the time to figure out what my way is going to be. And so I think it first starts with having that confidence. I'm not even saying the clarity yet. This is part of getting the clarity, but having that confidence to take that first step to say, I am going to own who I am right now. I'm going to own I'm going to be carving out my own space here, whatever that is going to look like. And I am going to allow myself the time to then look at what the next steps would possibly be, which those are more the practical and tactical. But for me, it even goes beyond it. It is mindset, but it goes beyond, more like Ray always says, nobody is coming to anoint you. Nobody is coming to christen you. You need to anoint yourself. You need
Yeah,
to
that's right.
christen yourself.
Yep.
And I would say, to christen yourself, to christen yourself, to allow yourself the space to actually go out and decide you're going to do this thing, whatever it may be. So I would say that that's a little more like mindset. And the other piece I would also highly caution is to be very mindful of the words that you speak, because, life and death is in the power of the tongue. I am, a kind of word of faith believer. And so I have become more and more mindful about how I am speaking about my business, how I am speaking about my future, how I am speaking about, the life that I'm going to live. And am I saying words that are speaking basically death over my future, over my life, over this business? And am I coming into agreement with some of these, words in my head that are not supporting me, that are not um, in alignment with the future that I want to see, and that I know that the Lord has planned for me. Um, and then I think, even just from our super practical side, like, Anita, what is something that's always lit you up? Like, even if you're like, okay, what would I do? What would I do? What's something that has always lit you up? Start there. Get curious there. You know,
So
that, I
good.
mean, so that's
Ah,
my,
that's so
my
good.
take.
Okay, can you give, we're just going to take a quick step back. Can you give examples, right? So I just know you and I know, but for somebody who maybe is listening today that is just at a different spot in their faith journey, and you and I are talking about, like, the word says that the power of death and life is in our tongue. So can you
Yep.
give just a quick example of, like, what would be something that you would say that would bring life, and what's something that you would say that bring death? Like, what does that mean for you? And how does
Mhm.
it work itself out in actual language? Because I think sometimes, I know from clients that I have coached, right? And I've been coaching, I've been coaching for a long, long time. And for the people that I have coached in a long time, what I've noticed is that sometimes we're not even necessarily, like, we're aware of what we're aware, but we're not always aware of everything. So I might say, today is just going to be horrible because one
Mhm.
little incident at 1 minute happened, and then I just proclaim the rest of the day. Now, what I am saying also in this, just as a oh gosh, just like an asterisk in the conversation, is that I don't know about you, Kristin, but I believe that I have a lot of say in my life. I love God. I know that He gives me incredible direction. I'm filled with the Holy Spirit. I go from thinking about 100 things I need to do at the beginning of the day, and being able to say, no, these are the one or two
Mhm.
things that we're gonna tackle today. But the mindset part is like, we are 100% responsible for that part, like what goes on between our ears. So give us just quick examples of what it looks like when you're speaking life into your life or someone else's life, and what it might sound like if you speak death into your life or somebody else's life.
Right, right. So I think something that everybody probably can totally relate to is when you're doing something, and for me, it's always tech, or there's always something, and I literally am like, I'll say, this is never going to work. Or I'll say, I'm never going to figure this out. I'm never going to understand that.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you right then and there, you are now coming into agreement, because
Mm,
I mean, this is a whole other conversation we could
right.
have, like, as far as like the authority that we've actually been given. Um, but you, by just saying that, by speaking that out loud, you are, in a sense, prophesying that this is never going to work. You actually are confirming that with your mouth,
Yeah.
and you are basically coming into an agreement with that, which means you are now setting yourself up to operate and make decisions as if though this is never going to work, because that's in fact what you are training your mind to believe.
Yeah.
Versus,
Yeah.
and I'm telling you, it's so easy to do. Versus, okay, how would I make this work?
Mm,
Or even, who could I call that I know understands this? Or is there, like, I totally laughing, but I just got on, like, Anita and I were just on, and we were talking through, because I had just gotten on with tech on my new website. And instead of me just, like, I'm telling you, I'd gone round and round, tried to figure it out myself. And finally I was like, you know what? I am going to, and I was very careful the words I spoke, I'm going to get on and just send in a ticket. Well, somebody actually got on live with me,
yeah.
which was amazing.
Go,
But I'm
girl.
telling and our IT, backgrounds, and so it was really, it just, again, if I had gone down that this is never going to work, I'm just so frustrated, forget it. I'm just going to go get a mocha, which is always my default. I'm just going to go drive to Starbucks, or I'm going to go I'm in Pacific Northwest. We have an
Yeah.
espresso stand in every area, but
Right.
those are like the real practical things that you can do to just become mindful and aware
Yeah.
of, oh gosh, no, I come out, and you can eat really quickly. Nope, that is not true. I'm going to come out of agreement with that right now.
Yeah.
I can make this work. And look at your background. I keep on saying, like, if I could get bacon, I always jokingly say that if I can get bacon imported to Taiwan, which, let me tell you guys what it takes to get a shelf-lived bacon product that has to have vets, it has to go through oh my goodness. I always jokingly say, if I can get bacon imported to Taiwan, this is when I worked in the Costco International division,
Yeah.
I can do this, for crying out loud. I can figure out how to set this automation up, people.
the evidence is there, right? And evidence is definitely there, and we got to pay attention to it. I recently had someone pretty close to me that was with me for an extended period of time. And as I listened to this person speak about certain things, really genuinely, like my heart was breaking because the person was saying things like, I'm such an idiot. And
Oh,
so, and I just was heartbroken. I said, okay, wait, pause. Maybe you didn't have like the best information, but what are you going to do about that right here now today? And the person was like, wait a minute, like kind of rattled, but in the good way of like, oh, like I have so much, wait, I can choose to do something different. So I also want to say, like, for anybody who's listening to this little segment, like there's no condemnation of whatever you've said about yourself so
no,
far. This is
no.
all a journey that we are on, that we are learning. Like the best of us can talk to our sweetest girlfriends and be able to say, man, I just really screwed up and I need some help getting back on track. And that's one of the things that perhaps, Kristin, you've had in your life. And I know for sure I've had in my life. I've had other women who I know and love and trust look at me and with love say, Anita, I hear what you're saying. And it could be anything. It could be about my business, about raising my kids, about my relationship with my husband, and had that gentle, loving correction that says, I think you need to like reevaluate what you just said, or what your perspective
Yeah.
is, or what you're thinking and talking and all that kind of stuff. So, ladies, just so you know, as you listen to our this episode, but just the podcast in general, like there's no condemnation wherever you're at. Just acknowledge it, and we just practice being self-aware, but it's a practice. It's a practice every day that we practice to be aware of where we're at and what our next steps are. So
Yeah.
let's
And
talk about
Anita,
that. Oh, go ahead.
oh yeah, yeah. I honestly, I would say this is just bubbling up for me. I think we need to start being okay with saying I'm ignorant
Oh yeah.
instead of, oh, I'm an idiot. I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. No,
Mm,
I was ignorant. I did. And, ignorant has like this horrible,
yeah.
no, ignorant basically just means you did not know, you were
Right.
not aware. And so to expect yourself to operate, which I am preaching to myself right now, you guys, to expect yourself to operate as if you were aware of something that you weren't. And somehow and this is like what us high performing women in corporate do. We expect ourselves to know, to understand, to have every answer for everything, regardless of what the subject matter is, right? And to get comfortable with telling yourself, oh, I was ignorant.
Yeah.
Not I'm an idiot. Not I don't understand. Not that I don't get it. And you can just move on and start to learn and grow, because literally you can learn anything.
Yeah. And if we also, I love that. That's so good. And think of how we take that when we come from being, and by the way, I personally believe that you can have an entrepreneurial mindset regardless of how you get paid. I don't, that to me is completely irrelevant, whether you're a 1099 or a W-2 or S Corp. That is so off my radar at all anymore. Like I just don't want to have anything to do with that anymore. But what I'm finding that when we come from this area of like, I was so successful over here, and then I'm shifting my skill set to over here. And how is it that I don't know how to do everything? Well, what do you mean? Like it's a new adventure. So just like when you, just as a way of encouragement, and these are some of the things that we do in our community. So, and you can go to anitaanello.com and find out more about the community that I sponsor, because my heart is to be able to create an environment where women of faith can have a safe place to regularly get encouragement and have somebody be their biggest cheerleader and look at their friends going, I love you and you are totally amazing. And I see that you can totally do this, even if you feel like you can't do it right now. Like I just really want to encourage ladies to come alongside one another. And frankly, if my community is not the best one for you, then go ahead and find somebody else's, but find a community where you can be seen and heard and liked. I would actually kind of discourage like the gigantic online communities just because it's very easy to become like faceless in the face place in those environments. But just know it's almost like you're just retraining your mind to learn something brand new. And sometimes as we get older, sometimes we kind of feel like, well, shoot, I already know all this stuff. Why do I have to learn anything from scratch again? And it's like, that's not how our career started. Like nothing in life started, nothing great that we do now started by knowing everything. We really had to learn, right? We had to learn to go through the process. So just a little side encouragement there for everybody who's listening. Like it's a process. It's a process when you're building up a business. So yeah, let's talk about, so tell me, you have this incredible, like this sticky template thing. Let's talk about that a little bit. How can that help the ladies that are listening today?
Yeah, absolutely. So my heart really is for helping, you know, women, and probably more specifically faith-based women, Christian women in corporate and or just high achieving women, really show up with personality packed content, personality packed, I would say just, showing up in your website, just showing up everywhere as fully you in a converting way that really speaks and draws your ideal clients and your ideal people. I would call it your people. Like people call it your tribe, your audience, but to me, it's your people. So that when you are ready to start selling or have your big offer, your big, you're going to launch a course, you're going to launch your first, like I just did, the digital product, if you're going to launch, whatever that may be, your coaching program, consulting program, that you are really speaking, first of all, like a human, because it is so important, and that your right people hear your voice, they find you, and they actually see how you can help them, how they can actually see how you can get them that transformation. And they see how they can relate with you and that you're their person. And so what I was finding is so many people were just struggling. I live on LinkedIn. Anita's on LinkedIn too. And I'd say LinkedIn and Instagram are kind of my two things. And what I'm finding is there's all these people who are more corporate and they speak corporate speak, which, hey, Amazon doc speak, totally understand that. And what they're doing is they're out there and they're putting up posts and Linda, I'm just going to say it. They're doing it wrong. They're writing about the wrong things. They're not choosing storytelling. They're not infusing themselves in their personality. They're not doing that in a way that actually makes it about their reader. All these things that people are, they're such amazing, good people, but they're just not, they're not hitting the mark. They're not hitting their mark that was set out before them. And so I saw that. And so what I was doing, or what I've done, is created my 30 sticky caption templates that can be used in any type of social. And frankly, you could repurpose them to use it on your website, on your emails, on your blogs, whatever. But it's a way to write copy that has a more personality. You can either infuse your personality into them, or you can kind of plug and play sort of Mad Lib style. That they already have like the emojis, which I know a lot of people struggle with what emoji to use. I've got emojis for you in there. And yes, emojis are a thing, people in corporate. I know it was a struggle. But people are starting to relate to emojis now. And so I'm there. I'm finally there, 3 years later. And yeah, so that was my new, that's my item that I've just launched. And it's 30 sticky caption templates that were written by me, a copywriter, who is really good at engaging and creating a community, and your people. And I'm selling them for $27.
That's so awesome. Okay, so for everybody, we'll make sure and include a link in the show notes so that you can check out Kristin's sticky templates. Maybe one last question as we get ready to wrap up here. Kristin, how does it look for you, especially from coming, sometimes in a corporate space as a Christian or a believer, or whatever phrase that you like to use for yourself, like just a woman of faith, and where oftentimes we find that it's kind of hard to speak that side. Now, for a lot of organizations, it's getting easier because the pros and cons of we accept everybody mantra that's going on around the world today can now actually include, right? Lots, not
Yeah.
just different people groups and genders, but also different faiths. So
Right.
there is some benefits out of there. But talk to me about being able to use that element of your faith in your business and how important that. Like, where are you at on that journey? How is it working its way out? Like, are there areas where you feel maybe you're still working on your confidence and being able to share your faith? Like, I know in my feeds, and I'm super open with my faith, and like everybody can be wherever they're at. But I notice, like, for instance, on TikTok, like the amount of believers that are producing radically valuable content today is really skyrocketing. And it's so incredibly encouraging to see. But like, talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, it is interesting because I mean, kind of even just taking a quick step back on that, like I just sometimes I just want to almost tear up a little bit on looking at my corporate journey and realizing how much power and authority I left that was sitting there waiting for me, that I could have picked up and used at any given moment, at any given time. There were times where I felt so incredibly powerless um in my situation. And the reality is I just wasn't equipped. I was not in the word. I was not, and it's so easy to do because when, I always jokingly said my husband married me and he married Costco, like, that there was three of us and,
Yeah.
anyway,
Wow.
that's a whole different story. But what I would say is, I think that it's twofold. Part of it is to really lean into your discernment and ask the Holy Spirit, where do you want me to fall on this spectrum? Because I'm not a big John Maxwell, not that I wouldn't be, I just haven't been a big John Maxwell follower.
Okay.
But I do know and understand that he had said that he looks at sharing his faith as more of you earn the right to do that. First and foremost, people come to him to, take part in his programs and learn about, public speaking and yada, yada. I think that, there's that approach. And ultimately it really depends on what the Holy Spirit is leading you to. And then at a certain point, which is more kind of my approach, which is like, F it, I'm going to stand out and be bold right now. And that's my holy F for you all. And I'm just going to fully show up as who I am. And that is a really, really smart, witty, quirky, faith-based woman who loves Jesus. And I'm just not going to compromise. Not that I've ever felt that I had to compromise that in corporate America. I'm just not going to compromise that now. And so what does that look like? I'm still walking that out. I'm starting to put more Bible verses up. I'm still starting to feel like, okay. And then also I think that there's a certain point where you need to feel like, okay, what have I been called to share? Right. So we want to use some wisdom in that, but that's kind of my roundabout way of answering you of like, really it's twofold. It's discernment and then also just stepping out and being bold.
That's good. That's so good. I know, like, for me personally, I'm considering like getting a tattoo that just says disruptor or something like that, because
Love that.
that really encapsulates me as a person. Like, I don't, yeah, I like to be able to show up who I am. And I also want to be able to have people stirred up, like either stirred up to this is amazing or stirred up to, oh my gosh, I hate that girl. Either way is actually totally fine with me.
You don't want lukewarm.
I'm really good with both. So, and like, even if you're in the camp of like, oh gosh, I can't stand that lady. Okay. Like, but I'll still bless you and still honor you and still like say, you're a rock star. Just, I'm just not your girl. Like, and just being able to be okay with all that. So I just want to thank you, Kristin. You have been such an incredible blessing today in so many ways. I know we normally record the podcast for about 20 minutes, so we have some extra content for today, which is so exciting because we know that oftentimes as women, when the relationship is there and the conversation gets going, it just flows like crazy. So I just want to thank you, ladies. I want you to know that a couple of things as we wrap up here. Know that there's always, always, always a next step for you to take. Know that I'm always praying for you. We mentioned a couple of links I'll post in the show notes. Kristin's sticky template link. You can find both of us on LinkedIn if you haven't already. You know, for me, I'm all over all social media. I also have a mastermind community that you can become a part of, or even just a free resource that's called the 6-Step Blueprint to be able to build a profitable business. So we'll post all those in the show notes as well. So ladies, be so well. And Kristin, thank you so much for blessing everybody today. We just so appreciate you taking the time to be here to share your story. And I'd love to have you back sometime. Let's talk more about authority and just dive into that a little bit deeper.
Yes, I'd love that. I'd love that. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.